The family of Sean Diddy Combs celebrating after learning his long-awaited fate in court. The family staying stoic as they entered Diddy's courthouse July 2nd.
And after nearly a 2-month trial with 34 witnesses and hours of salacious testimony, a jury of 8 men and 4 women finds Sean Diddy Combs not guilty of racketeering and trafficking, but guilty on 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution.
Before departing with smiles and waves after hearing the media mogul's partial victory, not guilty on 3 out of the 5 counts, covering charges for racketeering and sex.
This verdict has stunned legal experts, and what the jury didn't convict him for says even more than what they did. After weeks of graphic testimony, allegations of drug trafficking, and statements from high-profile victims, the jury still said no to the most serious charges. Why? Some believe the jury didn't trust the witnesses. Others think they just wanted to get home in time for the 4th of July, a verdict no one saw coming. The jury found Diddy guilty of transporting workers across state lines for illegal purposes, but not of trafficking Cassie, not of bribery, not of kidnapping, and not of racketeering. The prosecution's entire RICO case crumbled like a house of cards. Sean Diddy Combs was convicted on counts 3 and 5, both tied to moving workers across state lines. The jury agreed he brought these individuals over state boundaries for illegal purposes. These charges focused on what prosecutors called ex-workers, people allegedly transported as part of what the government claimed was a criminal enterprise.
The judge is currently deciding right now whether Combs will actually be released today. His defense arguing that since the music mogul was acquitted of the most serious crimes, he should be able to go home. Once court was adjourned, family members cheered today's.
But here's the twist that has everyone talking. The jury completely rejected the charges involving Cassie and Jane, the high-profile alleged victims whose stories dominated headlines for months. They didn't see these women as trafficking victims the way prosecutors had framed them. Cassie's claims? Dismissed. Jane's testimony? Not convincing enough for a conviction. That failure to secure a verdict on the trafficking charges set off a domino effect, one that crushed the government's most powerful weapon. Count 1. The racketeering charge under RICO. It was supposed to be the knockout punch, the charge that could have buried Diddy for decades. Instead, it became the prosecution's biggest embarrassment. A RICO disaster that has prosecutors scrambling for answers. To win on RICO, they needed to prove just 2 underlying criminal acts out of 6 possible categories. They had one, the interstate transportation of workers. That part was easy. But they needed one more. And that's where it all fell apart in spectacular fashion. Prosecutors showed images of drugs, pills, wire transfers, even alleged a full-blown drug network and possible witness tampering. But the jury wasn't convinced. Or maybe they just didn't want to go there. The government presented what they believed was overwhelming evidence of controlled substances and distribution, insisting this could serve as the second RICO predicate.
Combs' son, Christian, telling ABC News how happy he is.
Hey, yo, we love y'all. We love everybody watching. So happy. Pop's coming home. God bless. God bless the whole world.
What was going through your head when the verdict was read? Happy.
During deliberations, the jury specifically asked about the substances, a moment that gave prosecutors hope they were taking that evidence seriously. But then came the gut punch. In the end, the jury decided that this mountain of drug evidence still didn't meet the legal standard for racketeering. Think about that for a moment. Prosecutors presented alleged proof of pills, various controlled substances, and what they described as a coordinated drug distribution network that spanned years. They tied financial records to drug purchases, witness testimony to distribution claims, and physical evidence to what they called systematic criminal activity. The jury looked at all of it and said, "Nah, not convinced." They also rejected the allegations of bribery, kidnapping, and other criminal acts as enough to satisfy the second RICO requirement. This wasn't just a rejection of evidence. It was a complete takedown of the prosecution's entire theory about how Diddy supposedly ran his criminal empire. The drug ring allegations? Rejected. The supposed criminal enterprise? Shattered in court. And now, Diddy's team is already gearing up for their PR comeback.
No decision quite yet from the judge. Just a couple of minutes ago, though, I can tell you we saw the Combs family van pull up to court once again, presumably to hear this decision on whether or not Combs will be released. The deadline that the judge gave both the prosecution and the defense just passed a couple of minutes.
The sentence that's sure to enrage victims. Legal expert Christopher Melchor, who's been covering this case for CBS and several major outlets, dropped a bombshell about what these convictions actually mean in real time. The maximum sentence for the charges Diddy was found guilty of is 10 years. But here's the kicker. There's no mandatory minimum. Melchor expects Diddy to serve just 3 to 5 years in prison. That's it. 3 to 5 years for everything the government accused him of. He'll receive credit for time already served, which cuts down his remaining time even further, plus 54 days of good behavior credit per year against his sentence. It's a massive win for Diddy's defense team, and a crushing loss for prosecutors who swung for the fences. With RICO charges and missed completely, what could have been a life sentence has turned into what feels like an extended break from his music empire. According to Melchor's analysis, this verdict was clearly a compromise, the result of jury holdouts on the most serious counts. His take? The government overcharged with RICO, confusing the jury and making conviction on the biggest charges almost impossible to achieve.
Set to turn in their letters at 1 p.m. So for the last couple of hours, they've been working on their cases, both sides, for and against his release. The defense wants to see Combs walk out of those golden doors here behind us. They say that because he was acquitted of the more serious charges here, that he should go home.
The holiday weekend compromise that changed everything. Here's where this story gets really interesting and frankly infuriating. Legal experts believe some jurors wanted to convict on trafficking and RICO charges while others refused to budge. Rather than stay deadlocked forever, they found middle ground that let everyone go home happy except the victims. The timing tells the whole story. Deliberations happened right before the 4th of July holiday weekend. These jurors had been serving for weeks, dealing with complex evidence, disturbing testimony, and mounting pressure to reach some kind of decision. They were tired. They wanted to get back to their families, and they were staring down a long holiday weekend. After weeks of graphic testimony, drug trafficking allegations, and high-profile victims, the jury said no to the most serious charges. Some legal observers are openly questioning whether these jurors were more interested in barbecues and fireworks than delivering justice for alleged trafficking victims. The jury returned verdicts on counts 3 and 5 relatively quickly, suggesting they'd reached early agreement on the worker transportation charges. But they struggled for much longer on count 1, the racketeering charge, where they seemed genuinely split about whether the evidence met federal standards. This pattern suggests the jury found some evidence straightforward and convincing, while finding the racketeering theory too complex or controversial to accept. They took the easy way out, convicting on charges they could all agree on while avoiding the harder decisions about organized criminal enterprise. The bail twist that has everyone stunned.
Of all the time that he's already been in custody, he's going to get credit for that time. So no matter what amount of sentence the judge sentences him to, he'll get credit for about the 9 months that he has been in custody. Yes, he faces a maximum of 10 years on each of those counts. Highly unlikely that this judge is going to max Sean Combs.
In a twist nobody expected. The judge is now considering letting Diddy out on bail even after a federal conviction. That almost never happens. Prosecutors are furious. The courtroom is stunned. The judge announced he needs time to consider whether Diddy can be granted bail while awaiting sentencing. He specifically stated he needed to review the statutes and asked attorneys for precedent cases where bail was denied after conviction under the Mann Act. $1 million bond is being discussed. This is absolutely unprecedented. Federal defendants convicted on trafficking-related charges are almost always immediately remanded to custody pending sentencing. The fact that this judge is even considering bail shows how dramatically the jury's partial acquit changed the legal landscape. Diddy could walk out the courthouse doors today smiling while the victims walk away empty-handed. He could go home to his mansion, sleep in his own bed, and continue running his business empire while waiting for a sentencing hearing that might only add a few more years to his time. This represents a complete reversal from the prosecution's previous arguments that Diddy posed an ongoing threat to the community and was a significant flight risk. Throughout the case, they argued his wealth, international connections, and alleged history of witness intimidation made him too dangerous to release. The evidence that somehow wasn't enough. During this trial, prosecutors presented what they believed was a comprehensive case showing interstate transportation of workers for illegal purposes, controlled substances and drug distribution operations, financial transactions they characterized as systematic bribery. detailed allegations of kidnapping and false imprisonment, and extensive claims of witness intimidation and obstruction of justice.
We have to talk about this in addition to talking about his 3 decades as being a pop culture icon. You know, this is a human who has touched every facet of business, of industry, you know, politics, film, TV, music, Broadway, spirits, fashion, you know, but we also now have to talk about this case and the role that played.
The jury accepted only the interstate transportation evidence, finding everything else insufficient to meet federal legal standards. This suggests they either found serious credibility problems with the other evidence or disagreed fundamentally with how prosecutors connected that evidence to specific criminal charges. Prosecutors had argued extensively that drug distribution alone could serve as a second RICO predicate, emphasizing that federal law required only 2 proven criminal acts for racketeering conviction. They spent weeks explaining this legal standard and methodically connecting their evidence to these requirements. The jury's rejection of this approach suggests they may have been genuinely confused about what constituted sufficient proof for racketeering charges, or they simply didn't buy the prosecution's interpretation of the evidence they saw. How Diddy's defense played the long game. Diddy's legal team consistently argued throughout the trial that this case didn't meet RICO's standards, challenging every piece of evidence and every legal theory prosecutors presented. They argued the government was overreaching with racketeering charges, trying to criminalize normal entertainment industry business practices. Their strategy of questioning the RICO charges proved devastatingly effective. They successfully created enough doubt about whether alleged criminal acts rose to the level of organized racketeering to prevent conviction on the most serious charge. The defense likely emphasized that RICO was designed for traditional organized crime families, not entertainment industry business disputes. This framing probably resonated with jurors who were reluctant to treat celebrity business practices as equivalent to mafia operations. They also successfully challenged the credibility of key witnesses and the interpretation of evidence prosecutors presented as proof of criminal enterprise.
Inside the courtroom, Diddy's loved ones were seen celebrating the results of his now winding down legal saga. The Bad Boy Records founder is facing 2 convictions, both surrounding prostitution of.
Their ability to prevent RICO conviction while not stopping conviction on worker transportation charges shows sophisticated targeted defense work. The Cassie and Jane rejection that speaks volumes. The jury's decision to acquit on charges involving Cassie and Jane represents perhaps the most significant rejection of the prosecution's case. These were the high-profile alleged victims whose stories had dominated media coverage and generated massive public support for the prosecution. Cassie's case had been seen as particularly strong for prosecutors, given her previous civil litigation and public statements about her experiences. The jury's rejection of trafficking charges related to her case indicates they viewed her relationship with Diddy very differently than prosecutors presented it. They may have seen it as a consensual relationship between adults rather than trafficking, or they may have found credibility issues with her testimony that weren't apparent to outside observers. Either way, this acquit undermines much of the public narrative about this case. The Jane case presented different challenges, with the jury apparently finding insufficient evidence of coercion or interstate transportation that met federal trafficking standards. These acquits significantly damaged the prosecution's broader theory about Diddy operating a trafficking enterprise. What this means for other powerful predators. This verdict sends a chilling message to other potential victims of powerful figures in entertainment and other industries. If federal prosecutors can't secure RICO conviction with this level of evidence, resources, and media attention, what hope do other cases have? The prosecution had everything going for it in this case. Multiple alleged victims willing to testify, extensive financial records, communications evidence, federal resources, and massive public attention. Yet, they still couldn't convince a jury that this constituted organized racketeering. Future prosecutors handling similar cases will study this verdict carefully to understand why the RICO charges failed despite substantial evidence. They may conclude that complex racketeering theories are too difficult for juries to understand and accept when applied to celebrity defendants. This case also demonstrates the ongoing advantages that wealth and sophisticated legal representation provide in the federal criminal justice system. Diddy's team was able to create enough confusion and doubt to prevent conviction on the most serious charges. Something most defendants could never afford to attempt. The system that protects power. Despite weeks of testimony, extensive evidence, and multiple alleged victims, the justice system delivered what many will see as a slap on the wrist for one of the most powerful figures in entertainment. This verdict reinforces the perception that different rules apply to wealthy, well-connected defendants.